Hello, good morning all of you, and welcome to the first day of our program on National Mathematics Day. So we have nearly 4 programs on today and tomorrow, and this is the first in the series. Okay, so all of you know why we are celebrating this National Mathematics Day today? What is the importance of that day? Can you put something in the chat that whoever is present here, can you just type in what you feel that why do we celebrate Mathematics Day today? Any answers? Not yet ready with anybody? So we are celebrating Mathematics Day because today is Srinivasa Ramanujan's birthday, one of the most prominent and most gifted mathematicians India has produced, and his birthday is celebrated as and declared by Government of India as the National Mathematics Day to promote the subject so that it becomes popular and people also start practicing and actually not only practicing, start liking the subject as such. They don't scare about it. So that was the intent, because it has been observed that a lot of children are actually scary about this subject. So to get out of all those things, a day has been allotted. Like we have a National Science Day, we have a National Mathematics Day. So today's this first session is about the equations. Okay, so we will go to our equations and we will start what are the famous equations, and some of the equations are how they are so much. Every equation actually has a purpose, and we will speak more about it. And I will let me just switch on the change over to my slide presentation so that I can put my slide here. And yeah, so today's topic, what we will be discussing is that equations that changed our life. Okay, so not only changed our life, in general it changed the world as we live in tomorrow. Means now the present world as we see around, it has changed. And as we will show you that all this, many of the equations are involved and are engaged in all these changes, in technology changes, in thought changes, in philosophical changes, how we adopt to different our lifestyle, all those things. There are somewhere somebody has made some equations or some patterns based on which actually all these things are working. So in short, we can say that lifeblood equations are actually the lifeblood of mathematics, science and technology. Okay, but we also know that equations are scary, because we see that lot of people, just a minute, lot of students, lot of the general perception is that, 1 minute, general perception is that the mathematics as a stuff is not for everybody. There are some specific gifted persons who can only appreciate maths or who can do maths, but that should be changed. At least if somebody can't do proper, means if somebody has no practice or no formal training in doing very long or finite, in the sense that more precise mathematical theories, but still it should not keep you away from actually understanding and appreciating those theories. So that mathematics is just like a language, it is just like a new form which gives new insight. So that we will so in a sense actually it is formal and austere, and we will be slowly, I will be showing you that how there are a lot of different aspects of mathematics which are actually contributing to our lifestyle, our welfare, our technological moves and all. So equations in general, we will be speaking about equations for the total course of our this talk, and in many cases I will be taking in the whiteboard, and I will show you certain patterns, certain things which certain equations gives us insight. So equations in general are classified under two parts. Means as an equation, actually they are resembling certain things. We will come to it, but as a whole actually they can be broadly classified under two blocks or two aspects. One is called a pure mathematics, and another is called applied mathematics. So what is pure mathematics? Pure mathematics is actually a theory, in a way, an equation which is consistent with a number of postulates, number of axioms, through which actually axioms are like Euclid. When we study geometry in our younger days, in our lower classes, we study that Euclid's axioms were there, that there is a point is having just a position and no dimension, and if you have 2 points in a plane, and if you draw a line, and if the full line is on the plane, it is a straight line, and like that there are a certain number of axioms, and from that axioms actually we derive a lot of theoretical structure as such. That is pure mathematics. And applied mathematics is something like we are actually applying certain concepts to certain physical or certain situations which are of interest to humanity, and we get some results. Sometimes we want to calculate certain things, sometimes we want to predict certain things, and those things give rise to certain formulations. So that is the domain of applied mathematics. So this something is equal to something. An equation, as the name itself implies, the name is that some quantity, some expressions will be there, and it will be equated to some other expression. Either of the maybe that some side, one side it will be some quantity, or sometimes on the right hand side it will be 0, or whatever it is. So some part, some expression is equated to some other. So this equal to is very prominent for this equation. And any equation will have to have this equal to, otherwise it will not be an equation, it will be something like a expression only, mathematical expression. So we thought that we will just try to throw some light on how this equal to, these two lines which we are so familiar with, which take it for granted, how it came into being. And it is actually fairly well documented that how this use of two lines as equal to came. So it started at around 450 years back by Robert Recording. So in 1557, in a book called Wheatstone Divity, he has used these parallel lines using a word called nove, which is actually meaning twins. In an obsolete word. So what he meant is twins, and he wanted to use this instead of repeating the words that is equal to. So he made a symbolic representation of this, and from there, actually from literature, it says that people started following that, and now equal to is actually a part and parcel of every equation that we are speaking around. Whenever we see an equation, we look about it. So where does the power of an equation lies? So when we speak about equation, it is powerful. Where does the power of an equation lie? So the equation gives us actually some correspondence, philosophical difficult correspondence. Correspondence means it gives us insight into some mathematical structures, and it is a collective creation of human mind. A lot of people work and give rise to certain concepts, and they can be expressed in form of an equation. Maybe as Newton has told that he has formulated his law of gravitation sitting on the shoulders of giants. So there are a lot of people actually who have brought out concepts at various period of time, and maybe one equation summarizes a lot of things done by a lot of people. So, and they are actually also these equations, most of the equations are having some external physical, they exhibit certain external, or they aid certain external physical reality. So it is having to do with philosophical questions of correspondence between mathematics, creativity of human mind, and external physical reality. So this is this we can say as the power of an equation. Like we will see the lot of equations, and most of the equations are known to you, which we will be discussing. If you are a student of science, you might have heard, maybe you might not have worked with those equations, but you might have heard all those equations which we will be discussing. And if you have not heard, we will be telling you something about it, and you will appreciate how these equations are the way we perceive the world around us. So there are different kind of equations. Okay, broadly we have said you that equations are classified as under pure mathematics and applied mathematics. So we have certain mathematical truths which are like tautologies, like Boolean expression, De Morgan's law. So these are actually a certain mathematical truth which can be which is valid under all circumstances. They are called mathematical truths or tautologies. Some equations are about statements of physical world, like E is equal to mc square. That is a statement, something which we know. We will be speaking about it, and that is one of the most profound equations of this modern science, modern world, and so on. And then we have the Newton's laws of gravity, which is also something to say about physical world. And some equations are mathematical tautologies, mathematical truth, as well as they are also having something to do with physical laws, like general theory relativistic equation, the Einstein's equation in the general theory of relativity. And there are some equations give certain better definitions. We will see that they explain certain concepts, and that gives rise to a new class of mathematics. That also we will be explaining, like imaginary quantity. Some are universally valid, like we have the equations of gravity, that is universally valid not only for our solar system. Anything in the universe, the equation holds there to the scope of the equation, within the scope of the equation. Some equation describes the world very accurately, but they are not very perfect, and that kind of equation also we will try to just focus on in certain discussions today. And some equations, though they are less accurate, but on a limited realm, they provide vital insight. Like we have the Newtonian mechanics, their formulations, their equations, though they are replaced, or they are actually worked out with higher truths with Einstein's general theory of relativity. But as far as we are concerned, in the normal physical world, Newton's law works well. So less accurate, they may not be so accurate as the Einstein's theory, but still it is good for our working in a certain limited domain in our day-to-day lives. Some opens up a lot of philosophical questions, difficult philosophical questions, when we speak about entropy, when we speak about arrow of time, we will see that different types of questions come in, whether we can go back in time, whether that is a physical reality possible, or whether time reversal is possible. These are all deep philosophical questions, whether things can come back and assemble itself, whether there is a possibility of that. So these are some philosophical questions. Again, we will be throwing some light on each of them. And some equations acquire certain new importance because they may be used in certain they might have been formulated for certain kind of studies, but then they are taken from that particular field and they are applied to some other field, and they work quite well there. So they acquire new importance when we go. So equations are actually a form of abstractions. Each actually gives us in a consolidated form certain things about philosophical insights, certain connections between our concepts and relationships, certain things about the physical world. Sometimes it helps us to predict certain things, sometimes it helps us to derive certain more results. So all these things, so they are actually fascinating things, and they makes our life what we are today. So some equation somewhere is working for all these things. Even this computer through which I am speaking to you, all these the images as it is transmitting, we will see all these things. All these things are related with some equation or the other. So let us start. Let us start with the first equation, Pythagoras theorem. So from our school days, we actually see how Pythagoras theorem works. So let us go to the board. Joel, let us go to the board and let us see. So we know that in any, you be here, we know that in any right angle triangle, this triangle is supposed to be there's supposed to be a right angle here, though it is not drawn here, it is written here. In a right angle triangle, and if you take one side as the height or the perpendicular and one side as the base, and this is supposed to be, this is called the hypotenuse. So if you have this, if you find out the square of the hypotenuse or square of the perpendicular and add it to it the square of the base, you get the square of the hypotenuse. This is a very famous equation, and this all of us have studied somewhere or the other in our lower classes. So what does this Pythagoras theorem tells us about? This tells us about a relation which I have already described to you, and it is linked to algebra, it is linked to geometry, it is linked to calculating distance between the coordinates. That I will be explaining to you something like that. and then we have it has application in surveying, navigation. It has application in special theory of relativity, in general theory of relativity of space time. It is having a great scope. So let us just go to the whiteboard. Just a minute. Let us just go to the whiteboard and let us see where is that whiteboard. Yes, so all of you can see the whiteboard, I suppose, and now I will just show you. So we have seen that Pythagoras theorem is something like this. We have a triangle, and we have something like, if you say this A, B, C, we have this is say, if you call this as small opposite, if you call this as base, and if you call this as hypotenuse, so we have opposite square plus base square is equal to hypotenuse square. So who has discovered this? Though it is under the name of Pythagoras, but many people feel that, even historians are saying that it may not be Pythagoras, because Pythagoras was a mystic. He has formed a school of thought, and like Archimedes was he was an intellectual giant, but many people are not of the belief that Pythagoras himself was a giant, but he had lot of his disciples and lot of followers, and maybe some followers have done. And this is not also that true that this is only found in Pythagoras theorem, though it is popular by his name. In India also we have some sutras which are actually repeating the results which have been dated as much before Pythagoras has announced. So that is one thing. And then one thing is that this Pythagoras theorem not only applies, so it actually gives us a thing about measurement, so that if from why people started actually doing this, because it helped them to measure lands, it helped them to measure the width of a certain stretch without actually going through a width of a river. It gives rise to method of triangulation. For example, if you have a river here and if you have a tree here, and say if you want to measure the width of the tree, so if you can just have the angle, if you have a tree, if you measure a certain angle, then you can measure the width of the tree. So all those things are possible, and then it also gave rise to a certain type of new geometrical concepts, in the sense that we have, as I will tell you, we have the coordinate. It gave rise to a new form of geometrical concept, that is called coordinate geometry. Coordinate. Sorry, just a minute. Coordinate geometry, where actually you have a set of axes, and this was actually proposed by René Descartes when he proposed his own proposed a different formulation for the geometry, and each are actually number lines, where actually we have 1, 2 and 3 and so on, so you can go on. Similarly, we have a vertical 1, 2, 3, and say an arbitrary point. If you have a point, say any number which we can officially which we can just designate it as x1, y1. So what does that mean? That if you take a vertical from there, if you take a vertical from here and drop it, and if you take then this is what is called as x1, and this one is what is called as y1. So we have these two. So we have, so if you want to actually if you want to take another point, say x2, y2, so this is also, if you drop a perpendicular, so this becomes x2 and this becomes y2. So if you take the difference, so this is x2, this is x1, so this becomes actually say x2 minus x1. Similarly, this is y2, this is y1, so this becomes y2 minus y1. So again, if this is a right angle triangle and you can measure the distance between the 2 points, say x2 minus x1 whole square plus y2 minus y1 whole square. So you can see that you can measure the distance between 2 points, and this gives rise to a new geometry. This is nothing, just Pythagoras theorem stated in different form. So you can see that there are different types of application. For example, if you have if you go through a more planar geometry, and if you have say people started thinking about how this theorem will be applying if it is not in a plane surface. For example, they give two different types of topologies. Like if we have this as a plane surface, all these things. So imagine that we have, I say something that you take a white sheet of paper. You take a white sheet of paper and say I draw a triangle on this particular paper, and I draw a triangle, and then if I wrap it around, I get a cylinder. So whether the equation is valid here, people have shown that this becomes valid. But then problem comes is that if we take a sphere, of this sort, and if we try to draw a triangle here, whether we have the validity of this particular law, and people were thinking about it, and we will just say you something about it. But one more thing is that, see, this is, though it was about right angle triangle, we have something like, if it is not a right angle triangle, whether anything can be done about the this particular theory. So what is done is that if you have a scale triangle, different type of triangle, so this is a scale triangle, and this is not a right angle triangle. So how do we apply anything about Pythagoras theorem? So if normally the convention is if this is capital A, this is small a, this is small b, and this is small c. So in that case, what do we do? So here what do we do is that to apply this particular theory of Pythagoras thing, to have a connection, we drop a perpendicular so that it becomes a right angle triangle, and we call it D. Now we can apply Pythagoras theorem, and actually you can calculate whatever you want from this particular thing. So if you know these angles and sides, there are formulations where actually you can have, say, c square is equal to a square plus b square minus 2ab cos c. So this type of formulations can also be derived. Cos and sine, all these trigonometric ratios can be derived. Branch of trigonometry where all the we have sine A and cos A and tan A and all those things can be derived, trigonometric constants from this particular theory. So as you can see that from a plane point of view, this is fully valid. This is a fully, it gives lot of insight. It helps us to solve lot of all the plane triangles, and this is a very elegant thing about mathematics. It has lot of applied applications in the, our day-to-day world also, previously and today also it has lot of application. But one thing is that if you go to a different plane, say if you go to a sphere, in a sphere actually what happens is that if you take in sphere actually we have to deal with great circle, and these spheres become very important when we are dealing with actually astronomical concepts. In astronomy, the sky is somewhat like a spherical thing, and we can't have straight plane triangles drawn on the surface of the sky. So here actually we have to work with actually circles. So on sphere, if you take a plane and if you cut it, wherever you cut it, you end up with a circle. So we have to only work with circles. So in that case, actually what do we do is that, see, there are different types of circles which are possible in a sphere. If you slice a sphere anywhere with a plane, you get a certain circle, but that circle's radius goes on increasing. When you pass the plane of the sphere to the center of the sphere, you get a maximum large circle, and that is called actually a great circle. Great circle. And in contrast, actually all the other circles are called small circles. So if you have a, so if I just erase this part, if you have a sphere on the sphere, if you have circle, great circles drawn, say 1, 2, sorry, water is coming. So we have 1, 2, say 3. So you end up with a triangle of this form, and this is a spherical triangle. Similarly, and in this case actually, if you have drawn two perpendicular arcs, so this becomes 90, this becomes 90, so this becomes extra. You can see that we are violating certain thing about our plane triangle. Plane triangle, all the three angles add up to 90 degree, 180 degree, but in this case it is more than that. So in this case actually Pythagoras theorem as such doesn't get accepted, doesn't get worked. And similarly, when we have some other laws, and then similarly if we have certain other surface like a shadow shape figure, so these are non-Euclidean geometries actually. If you have a triangle of this sort, so this here also, those in these types of triangles also it doesn't work. So what happens is that, see, everything depends on the curvature, and these give rise to a new form of geometry called the differential geometry, which was actually proposed by Gauss, and his student Riemann actually solved a part of it, the spherical part of it, and Levachevsky has solved the other part, that is this one. So we have new insights of new geometry about new curvature, all appearing from a small type of equation which is simply stated a square plus b square is equal to c. In fact, algebraically also this equation becomes more important, because people try to actually find out triplets, say x1 square plus x2 square is equal to x3 square. What are the numbers which satisfy these three? What are the triplets? We have three numbers which satisfy this equation. So this is an Pythagorean triplet, and people work on these, and this is of a lot of importance for people in algebraic studies and research. So as I have shown you that Pythagoras theorem, though a simple theorem, though we learn it from our early childhood, it has a lot of long consequences, and people try to actually get better and better insight by going through this particular equation. So I hope now whenever you see Pythagoras theorem, you see it from a different perspective, and maybe you will start appreciating its contribution towards our various activities in our life. So let us move on. Let us move on to other part. Yeah. Okay. So Pythagoras theorem is over. So next comes a very important concept of the calculus, the derivative. So this particular equation is of one of the profound importance in our day-to-day life. And what happens is that with this equation actually we have lot of far-fetching. So this equation, how it came, who formulated these formulations? People say that actually when there was a plague in Cambridge, or due to that particular disease, lot of people were vacating their stay in universities, and one of them was Newton. He went back to his ancestral house where he was brought up by his maternal grandmother, and there actually he were for doing certain of his theoretical works, he formulated, not exactly in this particular form as you are seeing, he formulated a logic, a new form of thing which he called calculus, which is the conceptually very same as what we are seeing. This type of formulation what you are seeing today was actually attributed to Leibniz, who also thought about the same thing, about the same concept, but then he formulated it in a different symbolic representation mathematician, him being a more pure mathematician, he formulated it from mathematical point of view. Though our Newton was working with gravitational constant, instantaneous quantities, the rate of change, so he formulated it from these two concepts, and this gave rise to a big branch of mathematics, which is called calculus. And more expanding more, you will see that it is more complex analysis, complex variables, calculus, real analysis, all these things came into being with this. And this particular equation, this df by dt, you can see that f is a function. Function is something like you take a mathematical expression when it is mapped onto a particular real number. For example, fx is equal to, say, x by x plus 1. So if you put f1 becomes x plus 1 plus 1, that is 2 f1. Or similarly, if you have a continuous function, so this is a discrete function. If you have a continuous function varies continuously. There are definitions, precise definition what we mean by continuity and all. Mathematics is well defined. So based on those definitions, actually, if you have if you can define, you don't have to understand everything of this equation just now if you are not familiar with all these concepts, but just imagine that if you want to find out that how the rate at which what actually, say, object is moving, or water is falling, or something in motion at a particular point of time, what is the velocity. So in that case, actually, you have to find out a formulation which is based on this particular thing. That is the definition of the derivative of a function, and that is one of the most important achievement, one of the most important equations people have ever defined. So what does the derivative, or what does the differential coefficient, or whatever we have written, the last expression, what does it convey? It gives, as I have told you already, that it gives the instantaneous rate of change. What is the instantaneous? For example, a ball is rolling. A ball has started rolling from a particular time, so it is falling. It has not yet fallen. At a somewhat it is falling around a curved surface. If you know the curved surface, what happens is that at a particular point of time, what is its thing. So let us actually let us just go to the board once again, and we will go back and come front and back to the board, because if I go on speaking, it may not be very interesting, in the sense that so somebody will be going on speaking and it may not be. So what I have written down here is a symbol something like df by dt. So this is a function, f is a function. I have said you that f is a function means f is a mapping. It gives certain expression, say any expression, say algebraic expression. If I write, say, x square plus 2, so this is an algebraic expression. Or if you forget about plus 2 also, if you just write x square, so this is an algebraic expression. So if you have f0, this becomes 0. If you have x1, so it is become 1. If you have f2, what happens? Why it is 0? Because 0 is 0 square, that is 1 square. If you have x2, you have 2 square. For x you put 2, you get 2 square, you get 4, like that it goes on. So this is a function of that type. And then you have something called a limit of a function, which is a well-defined concept in mathematics, where it says that if you have a line and if you are starting from a particular point, say if you have a point number here, and if you are starting from a point, say x0, and you are moving towards the point x, you are reaching closer. You may come here, the midpoint, again you may come to the midpoint, again you may come to the midpoint. You go on like this, you go on in the limiting sense, but you never reach there. So that is called the limiting concept. So if you have, and if you increase the function to by a particular number, say h, fx plus h minus fx by h, limit of this one, instead of h actually, you can put it like that, limit of h tending to 0, df by dx if you do it. So if you are doing it with respect to time, so if this is a function of time, ft by dt, how do you do that? Limit of in this case df by dt. So if you have fx t plus h, instead of x you put t here, t plus h minus ft by h. So this is a quantity which is made to reduce to 0 in the limiting sense, and you get the derivative of the function. So what does it give? It gives the instantaneous change. For example, if you have a curve here, and if you have a curve here, and if a point is moving in the curve, so if you draw a tangent, so this value of the tangent is given by, say, if the curve is actually y is equal to fx. if this is the equation of the curve. So value of the tangent is the angle, that is, what is this angle? If you draw a line from here, so wherever this line is passing through the point which is touching the line and the curve, so you get the value of the psi. This is an angle. So this psi, tan psi, it is such defined as tan psi is equal to dy by dx. So this is the day. So you have like this instantaneous velocity, slope, you can find out lot of other things. Not only this, for a single variable there are functions where you have two variables, x, y, several variables, and in that case you can define the partial derivative, tau. So we'll come back to it, or many of you might have known. So partial derivative when both the quantities vary, or both the quantity can vary but you are varying one quantity at a time, all these are possible. So with all this, actually a new form of mathematics have been formed where you can see the rate of change. In fact, if you know a function, say dy by dx is equal to phi x, it is also a function. So I am using lot of quantities because I am speaking about equations, and something you will understand if you are not very familiar with working with equation. At least you will know the symbolic significance, like phi x is a function of x. You don't bother about what I have written here, phi, psi, a, b, c, all are actually general name, like my name is Jain Ganguly. Similarly, there are names for, you can put any symbolic names for any functions. So you have phi x here. So if you have, if you write it as dy is equal to phi x dx. So this is what is this? dy is a change in y. So if you have y here, say this is y, a small increment in y. So this is the concept of increment, delta y we call, and it becomes dy when delta y tends to 0, in limiting sense. So like that. So if you have a curve, say y is equal to fx, y is equal to fx. And if you want to find out the area within the curve, what is done is that you take you find out the area of a smaller part and then you sum it. That is called an integration. So that is a antiderivative. It is called antiderivative. Or integration. So in that way, actually you can have full branch. You can find the curvature, you can find the volume, you can find the area, you can find the rate of change. So a full class of new things can have been formed, which are very essential for us. Most of the thing works using all these concepts, and this full thing has been developed by actually it has been initiated, and for that a lot of people have contributed to it. The formulation, the way it has to be solved, the way it has to be applied in different situations, and different types of formulations and all those things. And with all these things, actually this calculus is indispensable now. Without that, actually we can't go through it. So that is the importance. If you are doing any branch, not only in science, if you are doing any, wherever change is there, rate of continuity is there, change is there, whether you are doing biology, whether you are in commerce, whether you are doing economics, anywhere, economics actually fully uses this concept. So anywhere actually we are using this part of this branch of this equation is the backbone for all those things. Okay, so this is so profound and this is so important. So next we have already seen two equations. Let us come to the third equation, that is the Newton's law of gravity. We studied this from our, say, high schools and all. We know about it, that it is actually formed by our Isaac Newton. It has been formulated, and this equation is actually representing a force. It is a force, as far as this equation is concerned. It is a force which is proportional to it is a force between two massive bodies, which has mass. And in this case, actually we will assume that the bodies have this force between two masses, the dominating force. Sometimes what happens is that if you have charged bodies, there are electrostatic force which are also there present, but for this particular thing we are assuming that this force is the dominating force. Other force, if it is there also, they are feeble enough to be neglected. So we have these forces, m1 and m2 are the masses of the body. They are separated by a distance, and we have the proportionality, like force is proportional to the product of the mass. proportional to square of the distance, inversely proportional to square of the distance. So let us just go to the board once again and have a look at this one. So let us come back here. So we have two masses, say m1 and m2, and they are at a distance d from each other. So the equation says that the force, force is proportional to the product of the mass, directly proportional masses, and inversely proportional to 1 by square of the distance. So how Newton got a sudden inspiration for forming this equation, because his equations, not only that there were a lot of people before him also whom has thought that there will be some type of force between masses. So that was quite prevailing that time. And then if you have a particular force which is acting, and if you have a point, then if you make a circle with that, you know that the area of the circle is around pi r square. We all know that. So if you go on extending a force which is if you are moving a point further and further away from a particular point object, taking the spherical sphere of influence, naturally it comes around that you have to decrease the force by 1 by r square. So in that way, combining these two type of thought, he has formulated, and he formulated that F is equal to g m1 m2 by r square, and g is this particular quantity is universal gravitational constant. Universal gravitational constant. Universal in the sense that you need not actually stay within our solar system, because this Newton made all these things actually to study the objects in our solar system, the motion of the planets, the motion of the comets, and all those things he made, and it worked absolutely well. But then it was then he further theorized that this is not only for any object in our solar system, any object in the universe where actually you can apply this particular rule, and in that case actually this becomes a universal, and this valid for everywhere. Like a velocity of speed is universal constant. Wherever you go, speed in vacuum actually the speed is constant. So this value of g is a universal constant. We have other physical constants also in our thing. So this is one of the most profound equations through which actually using which we can derive the Kepler's laws of planetary motion. Kepler's law states that all planets move in elliptical orbits, and then we can also derive from these laws, we can derive that they move in conical, not only planets move in elliptical orbit, or in general we can use these laws to derive what type of orbit can a satellite have given a initial velocity. So we can also derive the second law of Kepler, which says that equal areas are swept out in equal interval of time. So that also laws can be derived. And third law, which says that actually the square of the time period is proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis, because planets are moving in elliptical curve. So this is, if you take, this is the semi-minor axis, say B, and this is the semi-major axis A. This is called the major axis, major axis, and this is called the minor axis, and this is an elliptical oval curve, which is called an ellipse or oval curve. What is an oval curve? A circle, if you flatten on one of the diameters, so perpendicular diameters, it becomes an oval or elliptical curve. So what is, if an object is moving on this particular orbit, the time period, square of the time period is proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis. So this is what the third law. So all these laws can be actually deduced from using this particular law, and this particular law has profound influence on our two-body problem, multi-body problem, and lot of things can be done, and much of our astronomy are resting on these equations. These are one of the equations of profound importance. So this also gets the Hall of Fame, and this equation has changed humanity to a large extent. Now whenever you see this equation, you just understand that this equation is responsible for the rockets moving, this equation is responsible for the planets moving in its orbit. We can predict the planet, we can find out the motions, we can see how the satellites are docking, or whenever we are sending repair missions, how can we calculate the time, the transfer orbit, and all those things can be done using these particular equations. So let us move on. So so we have spoken about the applications. We have seen that it predicts as and further eclipses, when it is used in predicting eclipses, return of the comet. Halley's comet's return, cometary return of 76 years, he saw from the periodicity of the comet, but using some orbital parameters you can calculate for using this law any of such things. And so it has a profound importance. This equation is one of the greatest equation which humanity has ever discovered, and so this equation goes as one of the equations which we should appreciate. Okay, next we will come to an equation of a pure mathematics, that is the square root of -1. So that is how this thing came about. So we are all familiar. Let us go again to the board. Let us see what is the thing about it. So let us go to the board once again. So we have say positive quantity +3 into +3 is +9. 3 into 3, 3. We all know that. 3. But say -4 into -1, again minus into minus, we get +4. But say +3 into -4. You take minus and plus, you multiply, you get -12. But then if you have -2 square, it is -2 into -2, you get +4, and +2 square +2 into +2, you get +4. So in both cases you get +4. So we are always, our real number system, a system which can be put in a line. So we have the point 0 here, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So we have -1, -2, -3, -4, and so on. So here in between you have decimal numbers, rational numbers. All these numbers are tagged in this number line. We can there is actually a correspondence between the algebra, between the numbers as it is and the line. It is called as a geometric continuum. This every point is there, and we have the arithmetic between any two numbers. We can find infinite number of numbers. That is called arithmetic continuum. Arithmetic continuum. And then we have a correspondence between all the numbers and any point on the number line. That is called geometric continuum. Geometric continuum, arithmetic continuum, geometric continuum. Now, whenever you have an equation, say equation of the form, say x square plus 2x plus 1 equal to 0, you can actually factorize it. X square plus x plus 1 equal to 0. X you can take common, x plus 1 again common, x plus 1 equal to 0. So x plus 1 whole square equal to 0. Then we have two roots, 1 and 1. -1 and 1, I'm sorry. X is equal to -1 and -1. So you have roots, we have the solutions, we know what it is, -1 and +1. Again we have certain, we have a formula. Say if you have ax square plus bx plus c equal to 0, where a, b and c, these are actually some real numbers. Real numbers means some numbers of this form, real numbers. Then we can have a solution. There is a formula which says that minus b plus minus root over b square minus 4ac by 2a. So you can get the root of any equation of this form. But what happens is that this particular thing, what happens is that when we go to this particular thing which is within the bracket, so we know that we have seen that square of any number is a positive number. So if you take say minus a whole square, you get say plus b, whatever it is. But whether we can have a number, a negative number whose square root is a positive number, okay, or a negative, for example, square root whether we can have a number whose square root is means you are taking the negative square root of a number. So something like that. So if you have this particular formula, you have something like this, that b square minus 4ac. So for getting the square root valid as per the real number point of view, whatever is inside the square root should be greater than 0. Whatever is inside the square root should be greater than 0. What happens if b square minus 4ac is less than 0? Equal to 0 also, no problem. But if it is less than 0, then what happens? Now that may make a lot of problem. So people started actually thinking about that, and then somebody, for example, they got something like the x square plus 1 equal to 0, x square plus 1 equal to 0. So if you take x square, it becomes minus 1, then x becomes equal to square root of minus 1, say plus minus square root of minus 1. So what is this quantity? Because this has no representation in the number line. So people started thinking about it, lot of debates were there, lot of suggestions were there. Ultimately, actually, it was slowly incorporated that we put a I for this number minus 1. If you use this particular substitution, I is equal to minus 1. What does it indicate? How to represent this? People said that there were a lot of people working. One, especially Argand put up things that why not put if it may not be in real continuum as we have seen from the number line, but if we add an extra dimension to our real component and put the axes somewhat like this. Let us put the axes somewhat like this. So we have a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. Horizontal one is a real axis and vertical one is an imaginary axis. So in that case, actually you have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so and so, and here this is the imaginary, means you have I, 2I, 3I and so and so, all in terms of I. So here you have all the numbers here. So if you have a number, say you can represent a general number which is normally in present terminology called as a complex number. As a real number plus I into a imaginary part. So this imaginary part is also a real number, but it is fixed by a letter I, so it belongs to the imaginary axis. So you can represent it as x plus iy. So if you put a number something like this, x plus iy, so you drop a perpendicular form here. So this is x and this is y and this is the distance. So this is actually the length of the argument, you say. So it is the modulus, the magnitude of the number, x plus iy. So again we have by Pythagoras theorem x square plus y square. So if you square these two and this is perpendicular, you see the application of Pythagoras theorem here also. So we have this one. So this actually this number formed three things. People have interpreted it. Three things. This such a number. It is a point. It is a point in the Argand plane. It is a point in the Argand plane. And it is having a directional aspect, because this we are using an axis. This is the origin. So this is this becomes having a magnitude and direction. So this is a vector. Any quantity which has a magnitude and a direction is a vector, it's called a vector, so this is a vector, so it is a point, it is a vector, and of course it is a number. So we formed a new class of number called a complex number, and a new, not only real analysis, our complex analysis got developed, and we went and we discovered a lot of things, and these are used in electrical engineering and our quantum mechanics. You will see that quantum mechanics equation itself contains a quantity which is involving I. So this is of profound importance. This equation is one of the profound important equation. I is equal to square root of -1. This equation has given a lot to humanity and a lot to it. So that was what the point we wanted to make here, and I hope now you will appreciate that this will be something good. 1 minute, something is coming here. What is that? So we have just a minute. Yeah. So we have square root of -1, and I have said you how important, how powerful it is, how much more it has given us, and much more it will lead to. It forms the mathematical basis of it forms the mathematical basis of our complex analysis, electricity, magnetism, and a lot of different class of studies which we have formed. Next we go to actually a new form. It is called as Euler's formula of polyhedra. Now this is a very important, very interesting type of thing. So let me demonstrate something to you. 1 minute. So let us come to this close-up view. Say I have a box here. So though there is some other, this box is not a pure box in the sense that if I close this, so this is, imagine that this is a box. If I keep it like this, so we have faces, we have edges, we have vertices. So these are called vertices, these are called edges, and these are called the faces. So as far as you can understand the box is concerned, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 top one face, bottom one face. So we have 6 faces, and then we have one edge, say 1, 2, 3, 4, these are edges, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 edges, and we have we have 12 edges, we have 6 faces, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have so many vertices. So if you plug in all this in the quantity, if you plug in all this, let us go back to the presentation. If you plug in all this in this particular quantity, you will get this equation satisfied. So if you let us once more come back, f minus e plus v is equal to 2. So let me take this to the board. So we have so for any polyhedric solids with regular thing, sides, faces, and so any solid, we have f minus e plus v is equal to 2. This equation is derived by Euler. So we have, as I have shown you, this particular thing. If you hold it like this, so we have here 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So number of faces is 6. Number of edges is we have found out 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And number of vertices, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 vertices. If you insert these numbers in this particular formula, you get 12. Similarly, if you take any type of prism, you take a prism of this sort, say prism, and you try to count out the number of faces, number of vertices. So these all things satisfy this. So this is a very good relation. It has a lot of consequences. And now what happens is that now if you actually merge the faces, if you take, for example, let me go back to the slides to explain you. So let me come back to the presentation slide. So we will just see the importance of this formulae. So it has to do with vertices and faces of the solid. This gives rise to different types of topologies. What is an invariant in mathematics? Invariant is some type of equation which gives same results. For example, here the relation is between number of faces, number of vertices, and number of edges. Now, if you for this particular solids, polyhedric solids, if you put all these things together, you always get the number 2. So this equation, this is representing an invariance. The 2 remains constant throughout. This is a very powerful technique. So this invariance has profound importance to deal with a lot of mathematical topics. Now this gives rise to a lot of different types of our geometries, different types of topologies. We will be, for example, different types of structures and all those things we will try to show you. For example, if you have a photo frame of this sort, as you can see, we have photo frame where we have actually number of edges, number of surfaces. If you count, if you take a photo frame yourself, if you count, you will see that it satisfies an equation which is given by invariance of this form, f is minus e plus v is equal to 2. Similarly, if you have a torus means something like a tube of a cycle or a jeep, you have one surface and 2 edges. So you will get so there is a form of thing and which satisfies this particular equation. So we have all these things. So now if you go to a bigger, if you increase the number of holes, the torus goes on increasing, the 2-hole torus or a 3-hole torus or as a S-hole torus, number of hole or G-hole torus, then how this invariance changes. So it has been found out that invariance changes as per this formula f. So it is f minus e plus 2 is equal to 2 is invariant. That is the formulation. Is equal to 2 is representing for a certain polyhedric solids. But then if you change the surface, if you change the topology on which it is to be applied, the formulation gets changed. So that gives rise to new properties, new structures, as we will see. Similarly, for example, if you have a sheet of paper and if you rotate it, then the number of if you have a sheet of paper, we have if you take this side, this is a sheet of paper. Say if I just reduce it and if I come back to the close-up session. So if you have a paper and if you take there are 2 faces of it, there are 4 edges, 4 vertices, and if you apply this, then you have a certain result. Now you take this paper and you rotate it like this. You have again inside, you have number of edges as 2, vertices has gone, and you have the 2 faces, and you give it, and then you have a certain result. Now what happens is that you take a piece of paper and it will show you that you form a Mobius strip out of it. So if you take a piece of paper and you slice it into a part, say I will take a small piece out of it, and so we have a small strip. Now if I just twist it once and then if I twist it once and then if I put it, this becomes a Mobius strip. It has a one surface and we have 2 edges. So like that, if you change the geometry, if you change the surface definitions, you will have a different thing. So sometimes it may be had the Mobius strip. I have already shown you there are certain types of thing like Klein's bottle. This also is a very peculiar type of mathematical structure where actually you have the different topological things and which have a different number of edges. edges is not there, surfaces it has something like it is the same one surface, and it is embedding it in the same thing. These are the different constructs which have been made by our mathematical minds, and this particular equation has a profound influence not only in developing the topology, as we have seen different aspects of the topology, different aspects of relationships, and it has developing different types of studies towards understanding our physical world. So this is one more equation which is of profound importance. So this equation is maybe known to you if you have studied something about the statistics. It has to do with actually the distribution of probabilities. Now previously actually people were if you do a certain experiment, for example, let us go to board. I will just show you a certain demonstration in the board. So you have taken a certain number of values from a certain experiment. Say you are relating between, you are measuring taking measurement of two correlationship. You want to find out the correlationship, and you are getting certain values, and you are plotting it somewhere in this axis, say x-axis, y-axis. X-axis represents certain quantity, y-axis represents certain quantity, and you are getting plots here. So then what is done is that you have to find out the line of best fit. So that is what is actually propagated by many things. So you find out what is the error in each of this. So this much is the error difference, this much is the error difference. So you calculate all the error, and you try to minimize the error, and you try the error function and all those things you try. This is the method of least square, or the regression analysis, which is normally carried out in many of the statistical studies and many of the correlation studies, not only in science, in psychology, in many aspects of humanities also. So many people have wanted to actually study this from Gauss was one of the pioneers in this. He wanted to try the probability distribution. Probability distribution with probability, as you know, that if you take a coin, you toss it, you get the chance of getting a particular face, say 1 to 6. Means if you toss a coin, say head or tail, you get either a head or a tail. If you roll a die, there are six faces of it, and either you'll get 1 or 2 or 3 or ultimately 6, and the chances of getting a particular face is actually 1/6. So in that way, actually, if you plot the probability distribution, you get the probabilities of each of the events. That is a random event. Random events are events whose actually outcome you can't predict. So if you predict the probabilities of each of the event, you can distribute. You can study the distribution of the event with respect to a certain say probability of the function and the value of the variable, say x, and you can get certain type of curve. So Gauss has studied this curve. It is called a Gaussian curve, and he has found out that in most of the cases in our physical world, if the situation is random and under certain restrictions, so most of the thing takes up a bell shape, and that is called this normal distribution. So its equation is somewhat of this form. As you can see that any equation can have a particular format, so don't get scared about this particular lot of things are there. They have their own meanings, like mean, standard deviation, and all those things. Pi has exponential thing is there, so they have been derived. A functional form has been derived. So let us see what is the thing about it. It says the probability of getting an average value at a particular point, and then this curve, as I have told you, that most of them, any of these things, whichever is in random, any type of experiment, any type of events which follows in randomness, it occurs. You could not predict its outcome outright. These forms of the probability of finding, or probability of rejection, or probability of not making an error, can be found out using a bell curve. So you can test the significance of a particular random experiment, or what it is called. You can formulate a hypothesis and check it whether the hypothesis is valid, or you can formulate two hypotheses and check whether the main hypothesis or the alternative hypothesis is valid. All this can be done in the framework of actually our this normal distribution curve. It is one of the important curve, one of the important tools for most of the statistical testing, and it has a profound importance in many studies, as we will see. And then we have the other equation, that is the wave equation. Now, wave equation, actually people started studying about the waves, about the violin waves and stringed instrument and water waves. We know that there are different types of waves, like our longitudinal waves are there, where there is a change in motion, and transverse waves are there, where actually things goes on oscillating in their own mean position and wave propagate through it. So how to model these waves, and ultimately how to find out a solution, how to actually how to mathematically represent, because unless you mathematically represent a wave, how it propagates and all, you can't study. And this studying of wave motion is profound important, not only for vibrational waves, sound waves, but ultimately we have seen that electromagnetic waves, when there was a actually a blend of electricity. We will come to Maxwell's equation also shortly, and we will see that when electricity and magnetism were formulated together, were actually shown as combinable, the different aspects of the same phenomena, or so, like from the Faraday and Maxwell, his formulation. So this solving of wave equation, and ultimately to our quantum mechanics also, the solving of wave equation becomes of paramount importance. And solution of these equations of different forms, D'Alembert has proposed a form, or you can put a series solution for an equation, and then you can solve it for an algebraic series. So this gives rise to a well insight into how these equations are. So this shows the displacement, the rate of change, and with respect to time, with respect to space, you can study all those things. And here this C is with respect to speed, with speed of the object under investigation, or speed of the study. So as we have said you, the importance of this particular thing, this particular equation is applied in across domains, in study of oceans, in study of vibration strings, in study of air dynamics, in study of seismological waves like earthquake waves, and lot of things are involved in this equation has held, and its solutions of this equation, the method of solutions of this equation has given a lot of insight to that, our studying of that. So you can see, you can formulate and you can actually plot these waves using certain softwares, and you can study the changes in the visible area of the waves. So this is one of the important things. Similarly, we have one more formulations where when we are speaking about waves, we came about certain situations, like when we for Fourier was actually more involved in studying heat as a quantity, how it propagates. So to study heat and to study waves are actually periodic. We know that in when we study about mathematics, we know the sine and cosine functions, trigonometric functions, they are also periodic. So how actually people thought that how if we represent these waves as a blend of periodic functions like sine and cosine functions with some coefficients which shows the amplitude in which they vary. So if you show this, if you represent this, it is called as a Fourier representation. For example, if you have any functions, let us go to board, just 1 minute, I'll just show you. Instead of speaking, I have to write it, then only I think it will get a bit clearer. Let us go to board here. So we have equations of this form, like we have any functions can be represented as a sum of, say, an cos ax plus bn sin bx, where an and bm, minus infinity, n is moving from minus infinity to plus infinity, and we have an and bn are the coefficients. And the formula which is shown in the first thing are some formulations for calculating this coefficient. They are called Fourier coefficients. So any wave can be shown as a combination of sine wave and cosine and sine change over, and this is the formulations of. that particular thing. So so this let us see what are the importance, how all things can get important. So you can actually calculate in space time how the pattern propagates, and from this actually you can know the structure. The Fourier techniques can be used. It has been used in many domains, like it has been used in quantum mechanics. It has been used in studying of heat, as we have already said. It was initially formulated by Fourier towards the study of heat, and in fact this has been used in other aspects, like you are now in modern computer science. Actually we have lot of compression techniques. Compression techniques, normally when you shoot a photograph with a camera, you get the raw picture, where actually a lot of informations are there in where which are higher in memory, because if you have lot of if it is detailed image, you have lot of memories used up for that. Now if you there are certain techniques using certain formulations, and one of them is Fourier transforms, in which actually you can if you don't need certain type of informations, you can just compress that, so that the memory used now can get compressed. Initially the memory was costly, so it was more effective. Now with the actually the memory having at a cheaper cost, people take up the thing is much easily. They don't have to much bother about compression techniques. But then again, one problem is that if you have a high memory document, high memory picture, it takes time to load. It takes time for a computer to start up that particular thing. So in that case, actually the compression techniques are very important. And Fourier transform, similarly there is a parallel type of transformation which has been dealt, which is called as a wavelet transforms, which are mostly used in astronomy, image processing, because astronomy is a subject which deals with mostly information obtained from remotely from electromagnetic radiation. So whatever the image is obtained, they have to have we have to get the noise reduced, and we have to get the information maximum out of it. So all these things actually comes through a different using of these types of techniques called Fourier transforms. So that is one of the importance. Now we'll go a bit faster because it is going. So as I said you that Maxwell equation, which actually Michael Faraday did his a lot of experiments in Davy's lab. Ultimately, actually, he found out that electromagnetism, electricity and magnetism are actually can be combined, can be merged into something called electromagnetism. They are the different aspects of the same phenomena, and the final formulations were given by Maxwell's equation. You can see these are the equations, and they have certain operators and all involved. But don't worry if you are not familiar with all those operators. But this equation has a profound importance in the sense that our communication technologies, our transmission technologies, our lot of for example, whatever is going in the sun, solar, magneto hydrodynamical studies, all follows. Many of them follows these equations, or these are the backbone of much of the modern science. So this is one of the very important equations. It shows the unification of magnetism and electricity, and it's radio waves, formation of radio waves, actually moving out of our visible range and going through the other range of electromagnetic radiation, and considering that all the electromagnetic whatever means not only in visual region is actually only a small section of the full electromagnetic spectrum. So this equations actually captures the full story of all those waves, and they are of profound importance. So they are the Maxwell equation. Then we have the second law of thermodynamics. Now thermodynamics, as the name suggests, it has to do with actually motion of gases and the temperature distribution, and the how they behave at different temperatures, how heat is used to do work. So we have laws. The first law is very important. It is a mechanical law of that is that if you heat a certain system, a part of the heat is used for actually increasing the internal energy, and a part is used for doing some external work. So that is if we go to the board, I will just show you the basic formulations. So before we discuss a bit about this particular thing. we have say dq, that is amount of heat given, is equal to du plus dw. So dq is the amount of heat given, given to a system, thermodynamic system, given to a system, and du is the rise in internal energy, and dw is the external work done. So this is the first law of thermodynamics, based on which actually our mechanical motion due to heat, steam engines and all has been calculated. The efficiency of engine has been found out, and Carnot cycle and all has been studied. So we will just see this. So this particular, then we will go to it. Then there is the second law. Second law is to do with something called the disorder of a system. What it says is that left to itself, disorder goes on increasing. That is actually the orderliness goes on decreasing. So that is that is the profound importance. There is a quantity. It was proposed by Clausius. Quantity which is something like the disorderness. Disorderness, how we defined is that it is a ratio of the amount of heat per unit temperature, dq by t. So that quantity he calls as the entropy. Entropy is a measure of the disorderness of a system, and that goes on increasing. That is one. So this concept has been applied to many other situations, not only to our thermodynamic situations, and has been in a sense it has been applied to our information theory also. So thermodynamic entropy it is called. So actually with more and more efficiency, more and more thing, the amount of disorder of a means efficiency, renewability, the limits of a thing, all those things actually can be guessed from, can be predicted from this particular equation. So that has to do with the second law of thermodynamics. Actually, a lot of things can be said about it, but we will not go into the details as of now. We can see that this was the if you have a piston in which actually you give heat and you find out a change in pressure and volume throughout. Once heat is given in a system, if you take the piston out and then the piston is pushed in, each time how the pressure and volume changes, it forms a cyclic process, and that is called the Carnot cycle. And if you change it to the entropy as dq by t, the thing becomes a more regular shape in the form of a rectangle. So in this way different curves were formed, and ultimately we have a new thought, new idea, new situation where a lot of things got explained using the concept of the second law of thermodynamics. So that is one equation of profound importance. And we know about this equation of E is equal to mc square because it has been more popular after the Stephen Hawking's book. I think the brief history of time has come to the market. Actually he made it more popular by including this one equation in his book, because his publisher told him that if you increase each equation in your book, your sale goes down by half it reduces by half. But anyway, he included this because this equation is having such a profound importance. So E is equal to mc square. Basically stated, actually it is one of the equations which is a consequence of special theory of relativity formulated by Albert Einstein in 1905. So based on which actually he calculated and shown that the rest energy of matter is a product of mass and the velocity of square of velocity of light. So that equivalence of these two has been shown by it, and this also led to actually development of other, like our nuclear power, bombs in certain cases. So all these things are a part and parcel of this. Now how actually let us just see actually what relativity has to do, what is the basic. That was just one of the results. That is not the full block of relativity. That was just one of the consequences of the structure of special relativity formulated by Albert Einstein. So all this based on actually one of the things that there is no ether. So previously people used to think that our universe is filled with ether, and solar system, all the planets are moving and dragging through ether. There is ether drag. But based on this Michelson-Morley experiment, it was shown that there were technicalities. Actually, ultimately the result shows that there was no ether in that, and based on these results actually the velocity of speed has been taken as constant in vacuum, and all the frames has been if objects are moving in uniform velocity, all the frames are physically equivalent. Based on that actually Einstein formulated his own theory of relativity based taking the cues from Galilean transformation, as Galileo has used in his transformation, and ultimately he has got down with these wonderful equations where each is in the dimension of time, you can say a dimension of space. So that is the reason he is always multiplying it by time. And then he has for example, if an object is moving with a velocity which is comparable to this velocity of speed of light and comparable to the speed of light, so its time, its position, its mass, how it changes has been formulated through these equations. And then from all these things actually Minkowski formulated the space-time diagram, which is shown here, where you can see how the space and time changes from the present, past and future. And then further extending his work to the bigger structures in the structure of the universe, gravitating matter structure, geometry of the space-time, Einstein formulated his general theory of relativity equation. This is Einstein's equation of the general theory of relativity, and we know a lot of consequences of this, like bending of light was one of the experiments which actually get credibility to his own theory, that whenever there is a massive objects, the space bends there, space curves there, and where light, since it takes the shortest path, it appears that it has bent. Actually that is an after effect, but the bending of light as a word, it stuck in the media and we call it as a bending of light. So that was actually E is equal to mc square, one of the foremost important equations which has changed our life. Similarly, we have the Schrödinger's equation. There are a lot of things to say about it, but then we will not go on saying because it is already 1.5 hours. So Schrödinger's equation forms one of the basic equations to deal with quantum mechanics, which has to deal with the behavior of atoms and at subatomic level and atomic level. And here actually you have seen that there are certain things like h script, which is called the Planck's constant divided by 2 pi. You are involving the I here, I is here root of -1, and with all these things actually you find out the wave functions. All these equations are used because it has been found out that subatomic particles as photons in special, photons actually are sometime behaving as particles, sometime behaving as waves, and this has been extended by de Broglie at a certain level. He has also shown that electrons also sometimes behave like particles and behave like waves. So in general, mostly for though in macroscopic world this doesn't surface up easily, but in general for microscopic world this equation gets valid, and this is the Schrödinger's big equation, the backbone of actually quantum mechanics. So it gives a new perception, a new philosophical thought, and actually a lot of things have changed due to this one particular equation. I will cut the discussion short. And then we have the information theory, and in fact this is one of the basic equation of the Shannon's information theory. It has to do with actually the information entropy, and it is given by information is equal to negative of summation of these probabilities of a particular error creeping into it. So what is the basic thing is that, for example, if you are if you are sending a message, if you are sending a picture through an internet, it should reach as the picture with which you have sent. So there are, or if you are calling your, now it is much easier, but when it started, all this started actually, you are transmitting your signals in forms of data. Data is actually binary data, and they should actually pass as binary. For example, if we are playing a music and you are moving in a car, and car is actually jumping up and down. So your music output should not actually hamper. There should be some type of error correction codes embedded in the system to get you. So there are different types of codings which are given to the information. Information is in form of binary data, and coding is done something like you take successive binary data and group it into group of say certain other. So you are merging say 3 zeros, successive zeros as 2 zeros, 2 successive zeros as 0 1. So similarly, like with this transformation, if you transform this message, you get a structure of like this, and if you transmit it, sometimes you get actually an error after transmission, and that actually after you may, sometimes you may actually code it twice. So once you have coded, again you code it, and when you receive it, what happens is that you check for whether there is an error crypt inside this. So this is the full thing about the information coding theory, and our modern communication system rests on this. Actually, they have formed the geometrical thing, like it has been extended from a square to you can visualize it for information propagation in form squares, for cubes or hypercubes as it is shown you. The third one is a hypercube in the picture. So if you go on how this propagation occurs, how actually there are concepts of Hamming codes creeping in, there are concepts of parity bits. There are a lot of different concepts which crept in, and ultimately there are information coding theory which forms the backbone of today's secured transformation of data through through our communication processes. So that is one thing. This so that was about information theory. This is about a logistic equation which gives rise to something called a chaos theory. Chaos theory means otherwise the equation looks very deterministic. So equation is nothing but it predicts the quantity. For example, for a population growth, this is a constant, this is the present population, and this equation predicts the population at a time set. If it is at 9 o'clock, say 9 plus 1, so 10 o'clock, what will be its population? So like that, something like that. So at a particular time, if you increase the time by 1, what will be the propagation? That so if it is of it has been seen that in certain cases of population studies, this logistic equation, if you just increase the initial condition by a small amount, the final, there is a drastic change in final condition. That is called this butterfly effect, and these types of effect has been studied, has been gone through in many, not only in our population studies, in crystal growth, and a lot of other studies are involved, and in each of these actually chaos theory, not only in that all these domains, in fact in planetary orbits also, in satellite motion, in weather forecasting, in ecology, in earthquake modeling, this chaos theory has found a profound application. So that is one of the important things. So we have gone through a lot of equations, and all these equations have shown that they are of profound importance to us. But when equation gets more and more complex, big, complex, complicated to solve, what does it show? It shows that actually slowly what happens is that today with lot of computing power, lot of algorithms, lot of advances in computer science, and lot of data which is available in form of big data, computers are actually capable of generating patterns in the data, and this gave rise to a new form of actually thought, new form of thinking, new form of formulation, which is called evolutionary computing. Evolutionary computing, which extracts significant pattern from the data, and computer scientists thinks that is more optimistic in their thought. They think that actually what happens is that slowly these traditional equations will be obsolete and everything will be digital, and computer means equations will be given way through algorithms, and algorithms will rule the world. We can do everything using algorithm. In fact, Stephen Wolfram proposed in his book A New Kind of Science something called cellular automata, which actually each cell, everything is viewed as a cell, and each cell's behavior depends on the behavior of the surrounding cells. And he has proposed that the traditional, he has tried to show that particular concepts of cellular automata is somewhat actually superior to our normal traditional equation with which we are working. So I have given you a full overview of uh, equations as such, and how important it is to our life, and what is its final evolution. And I hope that you will not be getting scared, and you will, whenever you see equation, you will try to get some insight, or you will try to get a popular overview of that equation, because all equations are actually helping us in making our life more easy, more comfortable, and making more insight into the world around us. So this lecture was prepared by materials which I have taken from this particular book. So if you are more interested in actually studying detailed aspect of this, whatever we have spoken, you can go through this book and you can enjoy. So thank you for joining us.